Advent that we're in now, third Sunday of Advent, Advent's traditionally a time of self-reflection and penitence, with special themes each week just to think about. But you know, throughout Advent, the Christmas excitement builds, doesn't it? I don't know what it's doing in your homes, how it's building, how excited the little ones are and what they've got at school this week. One of the things that's a great joy of Christmas is the Christmas stories. There's a lot of storytelling around Christmas, isn't there? And special Christmas theatre. See if you're on what I'm saying. If I say to you, I'm going to tell you a story, what would the Christmas response be? Christmas theatre, pantomime. Oh, no, you're not. Oh, gosh, come on, guys. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to tell you a story. I blooming well am. and I hope you enjoy this story too. Who remembers or has heard of those musicals that we had came out when you were as old as me in the 60s and the 70s? Jesus Christ Superstar. Anybody seen that? Yeah? And Godspell? That's been reprised a few times, hasn't it? And I absolutely, I loved them at the time. They gave us a lot of opportunity to talk to our friends. It was the first time something like that was on in main cinemas. It was great. But I absolutely loved, do you remember the Godspell bit? You know it, don't you? Where the singer sings out above everything else, prepare ye the way of the Lord. And it really, really rings out and kind of resonates in you. And always in me, what am I doing? What should I be doing to do that, you know? The John the Baptist story is a story, perhaps all of you know some of it. Just a quick sort of recap. John lived in the first century, around the Jordan Valley. He's well documented in Christianity and in non-Christian literature as well. And he's called various things. We call him John the Baptist. Some places call him John the Forerunner. That's a good name, isn't it? John the Forerunner. I quite like that one. And some of them, see if you can guess which part of the church this might be. Some of them call him John the Immersionist. What bit of church would that be? Baptist, yeah. Be the Baptist churches, wouldn't it? John the Immersionist. I quite like that. I hadn't heard that one before. And in Islam, they revere, of course, John and Jesus himself as a prophet. And he's called Yahya, I think it is, in Islam. And his burial chamber is not in some Christian place. It's in the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, in Syria. So he's influential throughout a lot of particularly the faiths from the book, the three faiths that come from the Old Testament and the New. His mum, of course, you remember this story about his mum and Mary being pregnant at the same time? John the Baptist's mum was very old, and oh gosh, I hope God doesn't come to me like that. I just don't. That must have been quite overwhelming for them. But Mary and Elizabeth found each other, and of course, the whole story of God's work for us in Christianity comes about through those two women, really, in some way. And John preached to great crowds about forgiveness, and he offered baptism for the forgiveness of sins. But what I want to tell you about is another bit of the story. And it may be a bit of the story that you don't know as well. And the story is of the ruler, and his name is Herod Antipas. They had lots of Herods, and they all had another name. This is Herod Antipas. And it was his birthday. And, sorry, I've just jumped ahead of myself in the story. No good storyteller should do that. Herod had taken a new wife. And the wife he'd taken was his brother's wife. And it goes on in society always, doesn't it? But John the Baptist decided to point out that this was unlawful, that he shouldn't have done it. And what do you think Herod thought of him? I bet he's furious, don't you? You know, being pointed out publicly that what you're doing is not okay. And John would have pointed this out in front of thousands of people. Herod was furious. And it tells us that he wanted him dead. But he was scared of John's popularity with the people. Really scared of it. So, well, I suppose we could say he just put him in prison, but it's not a very nice just, is it? But he imprisoned John because he called him out on a bad act. Now we come to the party. Now we come to the day of Herod's birthday party. And he got loads of guests there, big palace full of people. You can imagine it, can't you? And does anybody remember one of the special entertainments was at that party? It was that his wife's daughter was going to dance for them. Now, guys, this doesn't seem to have been a nice little country dance that a nice little maiden might do in a frilly skirt, you know? I don't think so. It wasn't like that at all. I think it comes across that it was quite a sexual dance. Some people talk about it as the dance of the seven veils. It was a bit racy, to say the least. Well, by the time she'd finished, everybody was excited. And Herod himself was on a high. Whoa, that was fantastic. Well, that was great. Thank you for doing that for it. You can almost hear it, can't you? You can hear the undertone coming through, you know, of what she'd done, this young girl. And he says, I'll give you anything. You can have anything you want. A vow. And he makes a vow in front of the whole of the people, all of the people at his palace. He makes a vow. And he says, I promise you, you can have anything you want. Just say, and you can have what you want. Well, she didn't know what to ask for. It's not surprising. It's not every day somebody says that to you, is it? So she went, like any sensible girl would do, she went to her mum. And she said, Mum, what should I do? Now, I just ask you to think about the anger that might still be going on in her mum's heart about being called out. And when she went, this lovely young girl went to her mum. What should I ask for, Mum? You can almost hear her mum saying, you take this chance now, girl, to get rid of that wretched John the Baptist. We can get him out. And she told her daughter to go and ask, wait for it, for the head of John the Baptist on a plate or a silver platter or a dish. I mean, it was extraordinary. You just think about it. What an extraordinary thing to tell your daughter to ask for, isn't it? Anyway, she went back and she said to him in front of all the guests, I want the head of John the Baptist on a dish. I mean, I don't know whether Herod knew what to do or not, but he'd said it in front of everybody, so he sent guards straight away, and they went down to the prison and they beheaded him there and then. And sure enough, his head was delivered on a platter. Bit gory, isn't it? So, guys, who was responsible for that murder? Who would you reckon was responsible for it? Was it Herod Antipas who finally gave that order? Was it his wife who put her daughter up to it? Or was it the daughter who asked for it? I don't know. You might like to have a think about it. Who was responsible for that? I like to imagine them afterwards having some cause to discuss it. And I can imagine them passing the buck one to the other in the family. Well, you said that. No, but I said that. But you... Can you imagine it? You know, like in families when something's gone wrong. Hopefully nothing as serious as this, please. But you do have it. You started it. No, you said it. Passing the buck around from one another. Just let's move for a moment in this story to our world today. There's many, many sad and bad things, isn't there, in our world at the moment. Many of them, most of them in fact, seem to be out of our control or our influence. Guys, do you, like me, feel overwhelmed at times by some of the awfulness that we're seeing going on in our own country, overseas? You know, there's endless war going on somewhere. At the moment, it's deadly in the Ukraine. Melvin and I were having a conversation this week, and we were just saying, imagining what it would be like to be us in the Ukraine, even if we weren't on the front line, because we're both not that well, and we're both dependent on meds and on care, and we need to be warm, and we need, you know, just imagine trying to live that life. Imagine it was your mum and dad. Imagine it was, you know, it's not just the front line. It's just horrible what people are having to go through, isn't it? The lack of human rights right around the world. And of course, Qatar has been very much in the news, hasn't it? By the way, how are you all feeling about last night's football? Is everybody all right this morning? Yeah? Who watched it? Go on, show me who's watched it. Yeah, quite a lot of us. Who's still got Harry Kane on their heart this morning? I have. I love Harry Kane. We've got a grandson who looks a bit like Harry Kane, and he's mad on football, plays for the local team. They won the cup last year. And I don't know whether it makes me more fond of Harry Kane or what, but it was heart-wrenching. Anyway, I transgress. But it was a time, wasn't it? But, you know, there's been all this about the lack of human rights out there. And in our own country, the rise in poverty, in people being dependent on charity in our country that dreamt up the welfare state, and people are dependent upon charity, and the growth in homelessness and poverty in the UK. Do you, like me, feel overwhelmed with sadness at it at some times? What can I do? Sometimes I don't want to listen to it anymore because I don't know what to do. I feel that I don't have any agency. Do you feel like that? I can't, some days I can't even listen to the news again or read it. I flip over it because I can't take in any more of the pain that there seems to be around. So what can I do? What can we do? Pass the buck. It happened in John the Baptist's story. They all passed the buck about how bad it got for him. Do we pass the buck? Is that all we can do? Somebody else's fault? Policies we don't like? Do I just turn my eyes away and carry on as if not? Do I argue over whose fault it is? What political actions I don't like that have led to it? For sure, debate must happen, but I don't have any agency in that unless using my vote, and I don't have one to vote for at the moment. I don't have a place to go and place a vote at the moment, do we? So what is our role? What can we do with all this hurt that there is? We think for a moment, what do you want this world to look like? How would you like this world to look? How would you like our country to look? Our city, or even this village, or your family? How do you want it to look? I challenge you, go on thinking about that when you go home over lunch or whatever. How do we want it to look? Well, we can think of that, but we can still feel very powerless about anything to do to change things to this. You will have all heard of Gandhi, won't you? Remember Gandhi, the great active pacifist in India? They're two words that don't usually go together, aren't they? Active and pacifism. Very effective man. And Gandhi said something that I find enormously challenging and incredibly helpful over this sense of powerlessness that I know you feel as well. Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see." You. Be the change that you want to see. Just think about it for a minute. So that means, doesn't it, if we want a more peaceful, a more loving, a more tolerant town, village, country, family, workplace, whatever, be that. Become that. Be the tolerant, loving, best person we can be. Become the change that we want to see. No, I don't have any agency. I can't go and say to Putin and his lot, come on, you need to be better human beings. I don't have that agency. It's not given to me. It's not in my gift. But I can work at being the change I want to see in the world around me, in the community around me, in the place I don't go to work now, but lots of you do. And some of you are working in really tough places and there's hard things going on. Be that change, guys. Be the change that you want to see. John the Baptist, the forerunner, the immersionist, he prepared the way for the teaching about Jesus. We are invited this Advent to prepare the way for the world to look more godlike, for the places where we are, the agency that we have in our families, in our communities, to be more loving, to be more tolerant, to be more Christ-like. And think hard about how we are called to be the people that address the poverty, the homelessness that's going on around us in our country. If I can encourage you, do take the Going Deeper sheet, just because I've written it this week. No, do take it any week, I really mean that. But there are two really good short articles on it that are really, really readable. Guys, there's one very academic bit on it, not my favourite, but it's on it if any of you want to read it. But do take it and look them up. They're really easy to read and they're really helpful in this. And they talk about, do you remember hearing about a guy called David Shepherd in the church? Anybody remember who David Shepherd was? Yeah, the name rings a bell. He was Bishop of Liverpool. And when you're my age, you remember that. But he also was a great sportsman. Does anybody know? David, do you know what?
Absolutely, yes.
Go on, you tell.
Well, he was a county cricketer and varsity university chose to play for England.
Wasn't he captain of the English team at one time? Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. And he did wonderful work with the Catholic bishop in Liverpool. Great work. But what I want to say to you is there's a book he wrote, and it has the most startling title, and it's called Bias to the Poor. And the claim is that the gospel, as Jesus tells it, has a bias to the poor. The good news, when we had the readings, the good news is to the poor. Jesus said, tell the poor that they have the kingdom of God. There's a bias to it. We have to think about that. I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but pick a sheet up or whatever and have a look and take that forward. But guys, this Advent, have a lovely time preparing for Christmas. But I urge you, let's all think about how we can be the change that we want to see and the change that we're called to be in God's love. Amen. And blessed to all.